happy May. This is What Sharon's Reading. I am Sharon Colvin. I am the Youth Services Consultant for the Vermont Department of Libraries. And this is my monthly chat about what I have been reading. You can see on the screen, this is my library thing page. If it doesn't look familiar, you can go back and read, watch the other videos that will tell you how to use this tool. You are welcome to investigate, stalk what I'm reading, see everything that I've decided to put on here. It's totally open to you. So the way it's organized, I have it set up right now so that it's sorted by date of entry. So these are the newest ones right here. I just finished these two books, this one this morning. So these are two new ones that I have started but haven't finished yet. You can tell because there's no rating, there's no tags. I try to put tags and ratings and everything as I read them so I don't forget. And that helps me keep track of what I read and so I can recommend them to you. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit to tell you about what I've been reading this month. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to go back a little further because there was one book that I forgot to highlight last time. I totally skipped it, and I apologize. Joel Knowles' new book, Read Between the Lines. Fantastic. So I had to wait to finish my DCF books before I picked it up because I was so busy. And my assistant Aiden read it too, and we both loved it. This is one of those fantastic books that it's short stories, but there's a thread that connects each story to the next. Every character, every story is a little bit different, but the threads throughout the whole thing are bullying, identity, being an outcast, trying to fit in. It's really, really wonderful. This is definitely on the older end. I think that a lot of adults would really appreciate it, and if you should definitely buy it for your YA collection. So there's my shout out for our local Vermonter. All right, let's go up here. All right, I finished here. All right, I've been busy. I've been driving a lot this month, so I have been listening to a ton of books. Let's start with Kate Messner, All the Answers. So this book here, All the Answers, is kind of fascinating. It's magical realism, which I don't normally like, but I will forgive it because I like its plot. I think it's fascinating. So this is about a girl. Her name is Ava, and she is terrible at taking tests. She gets very anxious, and especially math. She feels like she loses all the information. It just spills right out of her head while she's holding the pencil right before the test starts. And so she's having trouble doing her homework, and one day she is rummaging around in a desk looking for a pencil, and she finds this old blue pencil, and she asks her grandfather if she can have it, and he's like, yeah, whatever. And so she starts using this pencil. What she realizes is that this pencil has answers, and it's a little strange, but if she writes down a question with the pencil, like, what is the square root of 100, then the pencil will tell her the answer. So very, very, very handy to have for math tests. But then she and her friend Sophie discover that it's also handy for other things. Now, the pencil has kind of a personality. The pencil doesn't tell the future. The pencil doesn't know everything. The pencil can only answer factual questions. It can't predict things, which is frustrating for the girls because they want to know who they're gonna, what they're gonna be when they grow up, things like that. And Sophie's obsessed with a boy at school, and she wants to know if he likes her. So they use this pencil for all sorts of things. The problem is that the more you use the pencil, the more you have to sharpen it, the shorter it gets. And so she starts to worry about what she's going to do without the pencil. And there is a very interesting mystery about this pencil at the end. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's fascinating and wonderful. So this book really highlights Ava's relationship with her grandfather. He's in a nursing home and he's really struggling. And one of the threads running through this story is she really wants to figure out how to make him happy. And one of the things she does is she tries to figure out what music he likes. And she brings music, plays music for him at the nursing home. And it's really sweet. So this is a wonderful book. I say home run for Kate Messner. Hand this to your kids who like these type of sweet family books, things like Wendy Mass, and other Kate Mester books. So really, really good. Okay, just to change gears a little bit, Afterworlds by Scott Westerfeld is a high school book. It's fan-freaking-tastic. I love Scott Westerfeld. He wrote the Uglies trilogy, or it's actually 4 books. And I just think his writing is fantastic. This story is 2 stories woven into one. And I often get lost in these kinds of stories, but this story was so well presented that I was right there with them. So one story, and it starts with a terrorist attack. So this is definitely a high school book. You open it up and it starts with a terrorist attack, and it follows this girl who survives, is the only survivor of a terrorist attack in an airport. And she's really, really struggling. And then she discovers that the way that she survived was by playing dead. And she played dead a little too well, and she actually went to the afterworld. And now she has the power, through kind of her trauma experience, to keep going back to the afterworld. And she meets friends, and she actually falls in love with a ghost, and it's just this wonderfully rich fantasy story. Now, the other half of the story is about a girl who is getting a YA book published, and it is this fantasy story. So it's a little strange. Like, half the story is about the author and the process of getting a book published. She wrote it in high school, and now she's taking a gap year, even though her very strict parents are anti anything that is in school, and so she moves to New York City, and she has a couple of relationships. There's definitely some mature sexual content in this story. She's drinking and partying with her friends, and rubbing elbows with other YA novels, and she has an agent, all that kind of stuff. But woven in with that story is this fantasy story, and I got lost in it. I was just totally amazed, thinking, "Oh my gosh, which one is true?" Which it really is a story about getting a book published. And I was talking to some of my colleagues, and we were all saying, we really hoped that there would be a sequel to this fantasy novel, but then, it was kind of a letdown at the end, because they're like, "Oh, right, that wasn't a real book." But it kind of is. Anyway, fascinating. It's a wonderful book. If you're a high school librarian, I highly recommend you buy it. If you're a public librarian and you have a good YA audience, this is a really good book. This is a really good crossover book for adults who like YA as well. All right, I finally read Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. It took me long enough. But as I was talking to him and his agent, trying to book him to come here in June, I decided I finally had to pick it up. It's not my favorite book, but I can see why the kids love it. I'm sure most of you have read it. The things that bothered me a little bit about it were, it's a big scavenger hunt in a library. There are a lot of cameras everywhere, which is just, goes against the library gestalt. And as a librarian, that really makes me tense. Also, the way that the library is laid out, with each section of the Dewey system in one room and that they're closed off, that really bothers me as a public librarian. I know, I'm personalizing this. And the fact that there are books that cross different, anyone who's working with Dewey hybrids or the bookstore method, you know that there are books that belong in multiple sections, and that it really bothered me a lot. So total nerd factor, but the kids absolutely adore it. And Chris Grabenstein is fantastic. He's so, so kind. So I can't wait to meet him and see him talk. I think it's going to be wonderful. If you haven't signed up, RSVP'd for June 13th, you should. Go right to the website, click on the DCF link, and you can do that. All right, back to YA Land. Mosquito Land by David Arnold. This is a really interesting book. It's a twist on the summer road trip book, of which we have quite a few of those. It's about a girl who's 16. There's a mystery about her mom. We don't find out until the end. All we know is that her stepmother and her father have moved her from Ohio to Louisiana, which she calls Mosquito Land, and she's very unhappy. And she's been writing letters to her mom, and she has stopped hearing from her, and she thinks that her stepmother is keeping her from her real mother, and she gets very upset, and so she hops on a bus and starts traveling north to see her mom, and she needs to get there by Labor Day for some mysterious reason. I won't ruin it for you. Along the way, she meets a lot of interesting characters. Um, and I will tell you, there's some dark moments. One of the friends that she meets on the road actually passes away in a bus accident, which is horrifying. And she meets a young boy who has Down syndrome, and she becomes very friendly with him. And he has been kicked out of his house, which is heartbreaking. And so she and this other boy that she meets, they kind of become this little family. So it's a really interesting story about kind of making your own family, and also the mysteries of family itself. She's trying to unravel all of this while she's trying to get to her mother, and when she finally gets there, she realizes all the mysteries start to unravel, and she starts to understand what's been happening. It's not a clean-cut ending, but it's really good. And if you have teens who like these kind of road trip books, or these kind of issue family, Sarah Dessen kind of books, this will be a good one for them. All right, keeping on the YA, my YA streak, Eden West. This book is fascinating. Here we go. I'm going to show you the cover. Pete Houtman is one of my all-time favorite authors. He should be taught in philosophy classes, I'm telling you. So the cover, as you can see, is fascinating. So this is barbed wire here, okay? And this right here is Eden West, and this is the outside. So this is a story about a boy who lives in the land of Nod, N-O-D-D. You can see it spelled here. And, when I started reading that, I was like, is this fantasy? I don't want to read it if it's fantasy. No, it's not. It's actually really creepy, realistic. Nod is a place in Montana, and there's this cult group that lives in this land, and it's I think 12 miles square, and it's a very natural terrain, and they live off the land. They are not allowed to leave the compound, and they're very nervous around outsiders. So it's about a teenager. He's 17, and they're talking about marriage, and they're talking about children and all kind of crazy stuff. And he makes a friend on the other side of the fence while he's out patrolling. That's one of the things that they do. They patrol the fence line. And he makes friends with this girl on the other side of the fence. And she starts talking to him about life. And he sneaks out and goes to her house and all sorts of things he's not supposed to be doing. And starts to learn kind of the context in which Nod exists. This is not one of those the police come and take them away, or social services comes and saves the children kind of books. This is more of a slow reveal for him. Jacob is not stupid, and he knows something's off, but he doesn't know what it is because he's lived there most of his life. And part of what happens is that new converts come to the house, to the place, to Nod, and they go through a process of becoming part of the family. And so he starts hearing about these people, and they disappear, and he is suspicious about what happened about that. So there's definitely some corruption in the administration of this cult, as is to be expected. It is not uplifting. It's not happily ever after at all. But I'd say it's one of the better cult books I've read. And the philosophical musings in this book are really wonderful and deep. It does not treat the people in this cult like they're stupid. They're treated very carefully. They're treated like human beings. Pete Houtman does a really wonderful job of portraying them as humans who are trying their best, and this is what they think the best is, and they are living their lives. So I think this is a really a good story. Plus, it's from a boy's point of view, which is also nice and fresh. So if you have teens who like that kind of thing, this is a good one. All right, Joan Bauer, another one of my favorite authors. Um, she has started writing these like tween level novels. She wrote the one Almost Famous about the girl who makes muffins. And she wrote the one with the dog. This one, Almost Home, really wonderful. And this has all happened in the last few years. And this is her newest one. This is called Tell Me, and the cover is terrible because this is actually kind of a dark book. It's definitely a tween book, but I want to make you aware of some of the content. This book's about human trafficking. It's nothing like the books you'll read in the teen sections about human trafficking. There's no sex in this book. There's very little violence, and there's not even an illusion of rape or anything like that. It's very sanitized almost, but not in a patronizing way. So this is a story about Anna, and she lives in a town where nothing bad happens. She's staying with her grandmother, and her parents are going through a tough time, so she's living with her grandmother. And the library is the hub of the town, which is adorable. And there's a flower festival, and nothing that ever happens. So she's in the library one day, dressed as a flower, promoting this festival, and she sees this girl who looks off, and the woman who's with her is clearly pushing her, and that this girl clearly has no say in what's happening, and she's very upset by what she sees. So she starts to talk to the people in town, and they start to investigate it, and because they're worried about what's happening with this girl, and so they start looking for her, and a friend of her grandmother's, I think her son is a Homeland Security agent, and so and this is where you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. He gets involved and gets the FBI involved and everything, and in the end, there is a great festival trying to bring this girl home. Now, the FBI agent does talk a little bit about human trafficking, the fact that these girls are working against their will, that they were brought to the United States under false pretenses, and that they're not really allowed to do what they want. That's the extent of it. They don't talk about, anything else kind of gruesome. It's mostly just, this girl is mostly fighting against, being held against their will. That's kind of how it's framed. So this is a totally safe book to give your tweens. But like I said, it is a hard subject. So I want to make sure you know that. And I think it's really well written. I liked it a lot, and it could appeal to your teens or your tweens who are looking for that kind of gritty content but aren't ready for, Patricia McLachlan. So this could be a good entry point to those darker subjects. All right, next. All right, this was actually one of my first nominations for DCF. For next year. I know we're thinking about next year already. This is called The Terrible Two. This book cracked me up. It's about these two pranksters, and they are in elementary school, and it's called Yanni Valley, and it has fabulous illustrations in it. I wonder if there's pictures. And yeah, there's illustrations. And so these two kids are pranksters. And so the one kid is new to school, and on the very first day of school, he manages to get the principal's car inside the school up the stairs. And the principal is kind of this caricature crazy man who's, being duped by these pranksters, and he doesn't know what to do or who to blame. And you come to find out that he actually did do it. And so these two boys start a feud and start out pranking each other. And some of them are big school-wide pranks, and some of them are just pranks against each other, trying to get each other in trouble. And it's pretty hysterical. It's extremely silly. And they're not the best citizens ever. So don't look to them for that. But I think it's funny and a worthwhile read for kids who are looking for silly stuff. Like they say, Captain Underpants-ish. There you go. All right. To balance out the humor, I've been moving down the DCF list from last year because I hadn't read a lot of them. Boy in the Wooden Box. I mentioned this in my May new book recording because there is a new memoir out that's a little older it's called A Jew in Hitler's Army. And if kids like this one, they might like that one. This book was wonderful. And I have to say, I was listening to it. It's on Listen Up Vermont. And I was listening to it, and I actually got really angry when he started talking about how he came to the United States and after World War II, and then he got drafted to Korea. I actually yelled at the car. I was like, what? That's unacceptable. But I bet there are a lot of stories like that. People who were basically prisoners of war and then they were drafted. And it was very fascinating to hear about how he felt safe in the army because there were rules and things he could understand. So this was a fantastic story. If you haven't read it, you really should. Dark, but really wonderful. I was impressed how many votes this book got on the DCF list. Really, really impressed. We have some very sophisticated kids in this state. All right, Bunker Diary. This is the scariest flippin' book I have ever read. Ever. There's a little bit of an argument going on Facebook about whether or not this is actually a young adult book. If you're a high school librarian, I'd be very careful. If you're a public librarian, you might want to think about whether it belongs in young adult or adult. This book freaked me out. I'm going to spoil the ending. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Everyone dies at the end. Everyone, including the author. So it's one of those books that ends and then there's a blank page because he's dead. Okay, spoiler alert over. So this is a story. They compare it to Lord of the Flies, but that doesn't even come close. So it's about a kid who's abducted, and he's in an army bunker, like a concrete bunker underground, and there's an elevator, and there are 6 rooms, and they're like jail cells, and there's a kitchen, and everything's set up for 6 people, but he's there all by himself, and takes place in England, and he's been abducted, and he was homeless, so he was kind of relieved to get out of the rain, but he has no idea where he is or why there are 5 other rooms. So, and then the second person who joins him is a little girl, and she's young and scared, and he takes her under his wing, and then more and more people come down, and so the little girl, of course, she discovers that if they write notes in the elevator goes up and down once a day, that they can get food and things delivered. But whoever the evil genius is who's keeping them there, and there are video cameras everywhere, and if they try to block them, then nasty stuff comes out and poisons them, which is wonderful. And the evil genius, who I'm just going to call him that, he sends them only what he wants them to have. So a little bit of food. One of the prisoners is an alcoholic. One is a junkie. And so he sends, porn, and he sends alcohol, drugs, all kinds of stuff, and it just totally messes them up. And it's deeply psychologically disturbing. And then the last person to join them, I think the last person, is a professor who's dying. Anyway, he has cancer. He's a brain tumor. And he's on his, he's on his last month of life. And so he's kind of like, why would I bother with this? But he's very wise, and he helps the narrator figure out some of this stuff. Now, the climax of this book is when the evil genius sends a note that says that in his coded poetry, that if they kill someone who's living in the bunker, they will be set free, which is fascinating. And of course, the junkie and the alcoholic are all over that because they're in deep withdrawal. And anyway, thus starts the end. And I don't want to spoil it for people who skip the spoiler alert. It is unbelievably dark. I would say it violates the unwritten rule of youth literature. And in my opinion, there's an unwritten rule in youth literature, and you can feel free to disagree with me. In my opinion, youth literature always ends with hope. Even if the protagonist dies, and normally the protagonist doesn't die, but even if the protagonist does die, there's always a sense of hope, always a spark of things are going to go on and be okay. You don't get this in this book at all. Nothing. Not at all. It was one of the most disturbing books I've ever read, and it's really engaging. So I read it all in one night, and I was in a hotel in like rural Maine all by myself. Don't do that. I really recommend not doing that. Anyway, now that you know about it, you can decide whether you need it. I would only buy it if you have really big horror fans in your library. And like I said, it might do well in your adult collections if you have an audience for it there. And if you like scary stuff, go for it. All right, this book I also listened to, and it didn't get stellar reviews. But one of the ways that I pick my books is books that are made into audiobooks tend to be books that the publishers anticipate to be popular. So I tend to listen to whatever's available on Listen Up Vermont or what's available via audio, because I figure it's probably going to be popular. So that's how I picked this one up. And I didn't review it in my regular video because it didn't get great reviews. However, I was pleasantly surprised. This book is about suicide. It's about depression, and it's a little different than your run-of-the-mill suicide book. It is definitely dark, on the lines of, by the time you read this, I'll be dead kind of book. But this one's fascinating. It has one of the best descriptions of depression I've ever read. Really, really good description. If you are looking for a book for a kid who's depressed, be careful, but this one might be good, might speak to them. Okay, so this story is about a girl who is not doing well. Her name is Azel, and she is not doing well at all. And she's very depressed. She loves science, but she has a father who has committed some mysterious violent crime. We don't know what. Well, we know he was involved in killing someone, a teenager, but we don't really know what part he played in it. But we know the whole town hates her father. He's in prison, and by relation, they hate her as well. And she's kind of looked on as the black sheep of the town because she's related to this violent person. She lives with her mom and her stepdad, who have more children, and so she is considered kind of the outcast of the family because her mom has another family, and they don't really pay attention to her. She kind of comes and goes as she wants. No one really cares what's going on, or at least that's her interpretation of it. She goes on to a suicide website where, and if you're an adult, this is going to disturb you a lot because these sites really do exist, where teens are encouraging each other to kill themselves. And she finds a post. Well, she decides that she might not be able to go through it, and she needs a partner, so she doesn't check it out. And so there's a board for people to post for suicide partners. And she finds this boy. His name is, I think, Robot Boy or something like that. And he is looking for someone to kill themselves with him. And he says that it has to be a certain way. It has to be on a certain date. It has to involve jumping off a cliff into the river. And he is looking for a partner who isn't going to flake out. And so the two of them meet, and they start talking, and the whole time she is kind of trying to battle his fears that she's going to flake out. And she's like, no, I'm serious. I want to die. This is what I want. And so they start plotting. Now, the tricky part is that whereas her family doesn't really keep track of her, his family does. His family is all over him, and they adore him, and his mom is especially worried about him. And you're not really sure why at first, and I won't ruin it for you, but his mom is kind of lovely and wants to meet his friends, and he's been depressed, and so he has this new friend, and she's really excited about it. And so she meets her, and it's kind of heartbreaking because she's like, I met your mom, and I don't want to traumatize her. I don't want to break her heart by being part of her son's death, but she goes along with it. Anyway, what happens is that the two of them start to fall in love, and then they have to figure out what that means. And I will spoil this for you right now. Spoiler, spoiler. They're fine at the end. Everything ends up fine. No one dies. Done with the spoiler. Anyway, it's a really good story. And I think it's a good story about depression. It's a good story about how to get help from the adults in your life. They really do struggle. Both of them might have been in therapy, and it hasn't really worked that well. And it's kind of about how to struggle with that. And I think your kids could relate to this. It's not a perfect story, and suicide books are, there are a lot of them, so you may not need a new one. But if you're looking for one, this could be good. All right, I finally read Beljar. This has been on a lot of lists. It did not end up on the GMBA list, but it's been on a lot of lists lately. This is a weird book. Beljar is about a girl who is going through some unknown emotional trauma, and her parents have decided the best thing for her is to send her to a school specifically for emotionally fragile teens. And so the school happens to be in Vermont, and it's called The Barn, and it's small, and so she has a roommate who's also going through some problems, has an eating disorder, and hoards food all over her room. And so this character ends up in this English class, and it's a special topics in English, and it's invitation only, and she doesn't even know how she ended up in this class, but her roommate's extremely jealous because it has this reputation for being life-changing, and of course it's very exclusive, and the students who take it become very close, so everyone's really jealous that she gets to be in this class. This class has only 5 students in it, and the teacher is very interesting. She's going to retire after this class. This is the only class she teaches. She's cut back on her teaching load, and this is her last class. And the first thing she does is she says, okay, we are going to focus on one author. She always does one author per class. It's only a semester. She said that the author we're going to choose is Sylvia Plath. And immediately one of the students raises his hand and says, we're a bunch of depressed teenagers. Do you really think that's a good idea? And she said, well, if any of you guys have a problem with it, we can talk. And of course, none of them do. And so they start studying Sylvia Plath. So they read pretty much everything she's written. They talk a lot about her life and her suicide. And then she hands them these journals, and they're older, fancy leather-bound journals. And she said, here's your assignment. You need to write in your journal twice a week during the semester. And I will make sure that you do. I'm not going to read anything that you write, but I need to see that you're using it. And then at the end of the semester, I will collect them and take them away because it's not good to dwell on the past. Sounds a little strange, right? Well, come to find out that when they write in their journals, they're transported back in time to when basically the worst time of their lives. And the main character, her problem is that her boyfriend died. And so each one of them has a different worst time, obviously. One of them lost her legs. One of them had this terrible accident on his farm. Everyone had their own situation. One of them, her brother was abducted. So they each are going back and re-experiencing these horrible days, and they're able to kind of play in those worlds. So she's able to reconnect with her boyfriend even though he's dead, and the other girl is able to talk to her brother even though he's gone, and all these kinds of things. And then as they go through the semester, they're working out all these issues. And come to find out, the teacher has cherry-picked them for this kind of catharsis. It's a fascinating story. I think it's a little strange in the beginning. You gotta kind of mow. If you're not a big fan of magical realism like I'm not, you gotta mow through the first 100 pages, but then it gets really interesting. I think this story really brings to light some important issues in the life of a teenager. One of them being that just because it was the worst thing that ever happened to you doesn't mean that you should be comparing it to the worst thing that ever happened to somebody else. I really like that message. Just because she lost her legs and you had a, broke up with your boyfriend or whatever, it's the worst thing that happened to you. It's very personal. You shouldn't compare. Everyone there was traumatized and had their issues to work out, and they're very kind to each other, which I love. And also the idea of therapy and working out your problems and having friends to support you while you do that, which I just thought was wonderful. So this was a great book. Like I said, it's not an easy read. It's definitely more high school, but if you can get a kid, Beljar is what they call the world that they go to through the journal. So it's kind of like Beljar, but Beljar. Um, anyway, if you have teens who are interested in these kinds of stories, or someone who likes this magical realism, or somebody who likes therapy type stories, this could be a good one. It's also full of mystery, and it all unfolds at the end. So you could be able to sell this to a good mystery fan. All right, I finally read Golden Boy, finally, and now I understand why the kids love it so. If you haven't read it, you really should. I got it on audio. I think it's on, I think it was Listen Up Vermont. It's just really, really wonderful. If you don't know the story, this is about a boy who lives in Tanzania, and he's albino. And so he is basically like a white boy in a black family. And he is treated very strangely because of this. He's not allowed to go out in the sun because sunscreen is too expensive, and he burns very, very easily. His eyes are not very good, so he has trouble seeing, and so he's not able to do as much work as the other kids. And so they make fun of him for that, and they tell him he's a burden and everything. Anyway, one day they lose their farm, and they travel across the Serengeti to try to go to family, to start over again. The problem is that in parts of Tanzania, albinos are considered lucky, but they're lucky when they're dead and sold for parts. So the albinos are taken for their hair, hands, and legs. And in a parallel story, there's also a lot of people poaching elephants and taking their tusks and just leaving the rest of them. So there's this kind of parallel story of poaching people and animals just for parts, and not treating them like they're, sentient beings. So anyway, he is extremely afraid and is being stalked by this murderer, and who wants his legs so that he can get good luck. Which is horrifying. And he runs away, and he goes to a city, and he meets a blind man who takes him under his wing as his apprentice. And because he's blind, he doesn't know that he's albino. So this is a really, really good story. There's a lot of adventure in it. It's got some great cultural insight. Plus the concept of being an outsider is classic with kids. This got a ton of votes for DCF. The kids loved it. And I think it could appeal to a really wide range of kids. I think it could be enjoyed by high school kids, adults, and then, down to maybe sixth grade. So if you haven't read it, you should. But if you have, you already know that it's wonderful. So I go on. I finally read I Am Malala. This is, I chose to listen to the Young Readers edition. It just came out, or not just. This was really good. So you probably know the story of Malala. She is really humble. That was the most shocking thing to me. Really humble. She introduces the story by saying, I'm a normal kid. I, fight with my brothers. I like to go to the mall. Pink's my favorite color. I'm really good at math. Like, she just, it's really, really humble. And she gives a lot of credit to her parents, which I think is well deserved. Her father adored her and made sure she got an education, which was not always the standard where she was from. There's a lot of really interesting cultural information. And then there's a lot of interesting information about when she comes to the United States and starts doing talks. And she really considers herself not to be that different from the kids who are back home. She just happened to have the luck and the opportunity to be representative of this struggle. So she's gotten a lot of hype lately, but I think this is a really wonderful story. I think that the kids would really like it. This young readers version could probably go down as low as fifth or sixth grade. And one of the things that was really nice about the audiobook is at the end, and I haven't actually looked at the hardcover, not if this is true or not, but the audio of her UN speech is tacked on at the end of the audiobook, which I just thought was awesome, because then you got to hear her talk in her own voice. So great read, definitely an awesome classroom choice, but also just wonderful, wonderful stuff. All right, moving on to some more familiar stuff. Rita Williams Garcia has hit it out of the park again. Are we surprised? No. Her first book, One Crazy Summer, fantastic, won lots of awards, was on the DCF list. Her second book, PS B11, won lots of awards, fantastic, was on the DCF list. And then her third book in the series, Gone Crazy in Alabama, fantastic. And with any luck, it will end up on the DCF list again. This book is phenomenal. It takes place in 1969, and if you know the story, you have these three sisters who are just full of life. They're hysterical. There's Delphine, Vonetta, and Fern, and in the first book, they spend the summer with their mom in Oakland, the Black Panthers. And in the second one, it's a lot about their life in New York. And this one's about they spend the summer with their grandmother and great-grandmother in Alabama. Now, they live in New York City, and they spend the summer with their mom in Oakland. And so they understand like the civil rights movement as being very progressive and liberal, and down there in Alabama where things are not. So it's very different. There's a lot of they've learned about things like the Klan, a lot of racism, which is kind of fascinating. And then while they're there, they start to unravel some of the mysteries of their family, which is hilarious and good stuff. And there's this feud between two sisters who will cross the river to see each other, and all sorts of wackiness. And their grandmother is secretly in love with the next door neighbor, and they end up getting married at the end. It's really cute. But in the middle of the book is some tough stuff. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's a tornado and one of the girls goes missing. It ends happily. It is still a middle grade book, but there's some tough stuff there. The whole idea of the girls blaming themselves for things, this natural disaster is terrifying, and the idea of getting lost is really, really frightening. So the girls are getting older, and so the issues are getting harder. So really, really interesting stuff, and a lot of interesting family dynamics that they are trying to work out. So good discussion book. I love her books. And if you haven't listened to them on audio, you really should, because it's hysterical. So, so good. Love it. Okay, you ready for the last one? I am, because I'm losing my voice. The last one, this book here, Girl Online, was handed to me by a 13-year-old. She's the daughter of one of my coworkers. And she and I talk books sometimes, and she handed me this book and said, "You have to read it. I loved it. I read it all in one night." And I said, "Okay, I will." It's a really good book. It's not, literary genius or anything, but it's sweet. And if you like, Stephanie Perkins stuff, like Anna and the French Kiss, then, the kind of romantic, sugary, happily ever after stories, then you might like this one. This one has a little bit of a twist to it. It reminds me a lot of, what was it called? There's an old Meg Cabot book. I'll think of it. Anyway, it's about secret identities. So a girl online, her name is Penelope, and or Penny, and she has this secret identity online. She has a blog, and nobody knows about it except for her best friend Elliot, who lives next door. And they share a wall, so they knock secret messages to each other through the wall, which is so cute. And Elliot's really struggling because he's gay. He just came out, and his parents are not cool with it. And she's his best friend, and they are just bonded at the hip. Her family is completely open and welcoming. He's over there more than he's at his house. They feed him all the time. He's over there all hours of the day. They don't even care, which is a really cute little fantasy. So Penelope has this online persona, and mostly it's kind of stuff like talking about her friends and, what's it like to outgrow a friendship. She's having trouble with one of her other friends, and what's it like to be clumsy. She's extremely clumsy and always getting herself into scrapes. She kind of reminds me, this is a British novel, by the way, so there's a lot of British humor. It reminds me a lot of Sophie Kinsella's book Shopaholic. If you've read those books, they're adult books, but this is like the young Shopaholic, totally klutzy, like doing all sorts of goofy stuff, but still unbelievably charming. So anyway, the thrust of the story is that she has this online presence, and then her mom is a wedding planner, and she gets invited to plan a wedding in New York City. So they fly to New York City and they take Elliot, her best friend, with them, and they go to New York, and they are planning this wedding. And while she's there, of course, she meets a boy, and his name is Noah, and they have adventures in the city, and they become very bonded, and she's there for like 10 days, and they fall in love. Yeah. Anyway, so they are, very close, and, what am I going to do without him? And she's posting on her blog, and what's it like to fall in love, and blah, 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 blah. Cheese. But it's cute. And then when she gets home, she comes to find out that he is really a famous rock star, and that in America, she didn't know because she lives in England, and he already has a girlfriend, some big pop princess, and she feels completely betrayed. And then, of course, the tabloids get a hold of it, and they uncover her identity on her blog, and they start calling her a trollop for, being with this boy who already has a girlfriend. And she's all over the media, and it's horrible. So it all ends happily ever after. But it's an interesting look at social media and identities. If you are in a large library and you have call for more of this romance kind of stuff, this could be a good addition. It's not a necessary buy at all, but it's fun. Could be a nice beach read. And it's kind of that it's a summer romance book, only it's set at Christmas in New York. So there you go. All right, that is all I have for this month. As you see, I just started the new Penderwicks. You have to buy it. So you might as well just go ahead and do it. Anyway, I will be back in June with more. You can reach me a lot of different ways. The best way to reach me is to go to our website, libraries.vermont.gov. You can go down to contact us if you'd like. That's probably an easy way, although it takes a couple days for me to get those messages. If you go to Services for Vermont Libraries and then Children and Teen, you will find everything that you want. And my contact information is right here. Give me a call, send me an email. You can see more videos if you click on Resources for Children's Services and then Collection Development. And there's all my archive videos here. I have run through of my favorite DCF books, a lot of interesting information in here. So feel free to use it. If there's some things I'm missing, things you think I should be reading, you want to have a discussion about anything, just drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. Take care. I'll talk to you next time.